Hello, I am live and still checking my settings. Hello, everybody. Welcome to, I think it's the 22nd talk on unschooling here on Instagram Live. And today we'll look into Canada. I will have a gorgeous woman. Hi, Asra. Hey, nice that you're watching. I'm gonna have Stephanie from Catalyseur de Potential. She already is watching. Hold on a second. I am... Yes, I'm into this call. Hold on a second, it should work. Hey, here you are. We made it. So cool, Stephanie. Thank you for being here and being my partner in this important conversation on unschooling and homeschooling. And I'm so happy that finally we made it, because we had some timing mix up with the summertime and winter time and European time and Canadian time. The other day.
We felt in the only week of the year where we don't have the same schedule.
But now we have made it, and I'm so happy to have you, and so happy to have you on this conversation, which is so important. My intention, for everyone who doesn't know this format, my intention for having those talks is to raise the awareness of raising children without school. It's possible, and there are so many ways of doing that, and there are so many people all over the world doing this, and it needs, for I think, for all of us who get first into this idea of not to school, we really need to restructure our brains on that. We really need to decondition a lot of what we think that has to be, that is important, and that is necessary. And practice in so many different ways shows that there is so much possible in so many unconventional ways. So that's why I'm so happy, Stephanie, that you are here. We had already one very interesting talk on that. You are an university teacher, is this correct? Or would you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, clearly it's not university, it's cégep, but Quebec is the only place in the world that has that structure. It's between, like, instead of having, we have 1 year less of secondary, and we have those 2 years in between secondary and university. So it's a school to go to university or to choose a professional path. So yes, I've been teaching for a couple of years entrepreneurship and event planning. And yes, well, I'm a neuroscience coach, and here in Quebec, I manage, I'm in charge of the entrepreneurship program for women. So yes, I do a lot of things, and we're, as you said, homeschooling our children now. For the past 3 years for the small two, and only for 1 year for the older one, because now she's in cégep and she's going like in real life with her friend and everything. But yes, it's a part of her life now.
Awesome. So we are really on very distant parts of this world. I'm here in Austria. You're in French Canadian part of Canada, in Quebec, and we have met through the entrepreneurship. We have the same mentor. We were following in a program the past year. For me, it's already finished. I'm not sure how far are you in this program. But yeah, so you have three children. How old are the younger ones? The older one is
6, 8, and 18. soon.
6, 8, and 18, yeah.
Yes.
So we discovered in our talk earlier that even though we are so far apart from each other, the politics on this subject seem to be very similar in our countries, and it's not everywhere the same thing, especially in English-speaking countries. They seem to be quite open,
Yes,
and have more tradition on homeschooling or non-schooling, or school, education without school, however you want to call it. But then there are also those countries where they seem to have a little bit, I don't know, they seem to be scared about those parents and about those families who walk their own paths with this. So
yes.
Canada seems to be one of those more restrictive countries as well, right?
I wouldn't say Canada, because the strange part or the particularity here in Canada is it works by province. And as you said at the beginning, Quebec is the only province French speaking. All the rest of North America, except for Mexico, is English. So here in Quebec, it's much different than, for example, in Ontario or in Western Canada or Eastern Canada. So Quebec is a small place where it's much more like France or like yourself, where they're more and more restraining the because it's when you look at the human right, it's a right to like educate your children as you want. Here in Quebec, for the past couple of years, they've changed a bit what was prior. Prior, it was not obligatory or mandatory to register as a homeschooling parent. Now it is. In the past couple of years, they asked us also, we have to do 3 things. We have to register and present them a curriculum for all the kids homeschooled. Second, which gonna come, that's the beginning of the year, or when you decide to unschool them. The second is at the beginning of the year, so January, February, we'll have to present a midterm overview of where we are in that program. And then at the end of the year, we need to present or a portfolio where we see how they improve, or we can go with a teacher that has a license, and that person is able to say if we meet the expectation or not. Since last year, the end of the year exam, which are all across Quebec, are now mandatory. So normally we need to subscribe and put them in those exams. But as you know, most of the family unschooling or homeschooling their kids are not in a schooling format. So it's not like every day 8 to 5 or 8 to 3 and doing real exams. Some are. I always say that unschooling is like a rainbow. There's on one side those that are doing maybe school at home, like on this type of format, and on the other side we have all the unschooling community, which are education led by the children, which everything on this is very interesting. So you can pick and choose whatever you like. On our side, we decided that French writing and reading is something more formal because it's not that easy. But for the rest, and mathematics a bit too, but for the rest, for example, science, for everything you can learn, we're more on a unschooling type where we do activities, learn about something, go with the interest of the kids. So I say it's like a rainbow. So Quebec and Canada, well, we're part of Canada, but it's very different because every province has its own educational system, and ours is much more a French one. So it's much more concise. Even like, for example, the kids that are doing the entire path, home or unschooling, that want to go after to university, it's much more difficult. It's possible now, but it's much more difficult than it is, for example, in those Anglophones university all across Canada and even in Quebec. They are much more used to having portfolio, you write a letter, explain why you want to go in that program and why you're a good candidate and everything. So it changed with time, and the more it goes, the more it gets restrained. We're the only part of North America where how do they call this in English? Well, school for unschooler. It's autonomous school. I don't know how to say it in English. It's illegal. So you can go
Autonomous.
across you can go across the border, or in the States, or everywhere around Quebec is okay, but in Quebec we're not allowed to have some. So yes, you were right when you say where, like in Quebec, it's much more like less welcome, I'd say.
Do you have numbers, Stephanie? How many kids are not in school? I don't know, in Quebec and maybe even in Canada. Do you have numbers? Do you know
No,
any
I
of
don't
those?
have numbers by art like that, but I know that the pandemic increased significantly here in Quebec and all across Canada, the amount of family that chose that. Because when the pandemic hit, all the kids were at home, and many parents needed to do the school themselves, and many of them figured out some stuff which we are part of. Like, my son was very anxious when he was going to kindergarten. Imagine, he was only 5 and he was already anxious. And then the pandemic hits, and finally he was super, super soft and super comfortable at home. And he learns some stuff very, very fast, much faster than other kids. And he felt it was boring in school. And for some stuff like writing and reading, he has dyslexia, and so it was much more difficult, and he was always pushed, and he was beginning to refuse to read, refuse to write. It took us almost a year before he started again to read and sometimes write. And till today, after almost 3 years of school, he's still very, very reticent, like to write. For example, when it's not a good day, it's the first thing he doesn't want to do. He's super stressed, he's not good enough, and he was only 5. So for us, it was like a relief to see that he felt better at home. He was crying in the morning not to go to school, so we were like, that's impossible. We're not going to bring him to university having that type of thing happening like in the morning. And my husband used to have a gym, and with the pandemic we decided to close the physical gym, because for here it has been closed for almost 18 months. So as a business it was not working, and so it was easier. Well, the timing was perfect. We closed the gym and the schools were closed, and we started doing that. And Laetitia wasn't going to school at that time. She was in daycare, and finally she never went, and Joshua went for 6 months, and it was a catastrophe. If you talk to him, he's like, but the doors are still open. If they really want to go back to school whenever in their path, they could. But honestly, it gives us much more flexibility about, for example, traveling, working from abroad, teaching them other stuff, which I think, like, for example, traveling brings you the notion of differences, of meeting people that are living completely differently than you are. So I think that not going to school brings other stuff, and it's much more flexible. Like, if we would have been in school, for Joshua, for example, he's 3 or 4 years faster in mathematics. He's very, very quick. He's doing multiplication when he goes to bed at night. He loves that like for forever. And in French, writing and reading, it would be like maybe a year or two delayed. So it's very difficult in school to have those type of kids. And I think it's amazing. And what I've learned in Quebec is that many of the children that are unschooled, that went to school and finally are removed, are children with neuroatypia. Like, for example, Joshua is gifted with dyslexia and hypersensitivity. So it's in school, everything overwhelmed very, very quick. And there's a lot of different brain wiring that are in the homeschooling community because it doesn't fit with the very square school. How is it in Austria?
I actually never have thought about this in this kind of way, but and I wouldn't have seen it very sticking out, but yes, there is probably a higher rate on and higher average on children with what's the term? Neuro.
Yeah, in French we say neuroatypic, so maybe atypical, neuroatypical.
Yeah, I think we know what we are talking about. So
Yeah.
there is a specific term. Asra, help us out. You're English speaking.
Oh, neurodivergent.
Yes, neurodivergent. Exactly. Yeah, probably there is a higher number on neurodivergent students not going to school, whereas in school. Probably, yes. But it's not really very, in my community where I'm settled in, it doesn't stick out really.
Oh, well, in the community and between the children, it doesn't stick out. We know because, well, if they never went to school, there's no harm. If they went to school, sometimes there's trauma, and because they're not fit for the school. And honestly, the more I'm out of the schooling system, the more I feel that many children and many even teenager and even adult are not fit for school because it's built in a special way. And for us in Quebec, it hasn't changed since the 1950s or the 1960s. Many things had changed and evolved, and the people in the system are amazing people that really want to do stuff with the kids. I'm not talking about the individuals. I'm really talking about the system. And that system, I don't know how it is on your side, but here we see many, in school, we see many problematic. A teacher has half of their class with neurodivergent problem. There's more and more people leaving school at the teenage time. So there's many things that are indicators that the format as it is not meeting the minimum level of expectation for the population. And
this is such an
sorry.
I think I'm still on this point. This is such an interesting observation, Stephanie, that you say within the unschooling community, the neurodivergent kids don't stick out because they are not, it's not made a problem, right? It's not made to a problem. It's not triggered. It's not traumatized. So it's there, but it doesn't stick out. And what I definitely see is that the social interaction between the kids in the unschooled in those unschooled groups or communities, they relate differently to each other. They don't have this thing that they only speak to kids in their age. You know, they help out younger kids. They are daring talking to older kids. There is not this issue of separating each other throughout age.
Yes.
And they dare also much more to talk to adults, which, you know, we see a lot with schooled kids, that they have this issue of not daring talking to adults and stuff like that. So
completely. And as we are, like, we're talking about two different worlds. When I talk with friends that are not used to or aware of what is really homeschooling, I explain to them that it's two different a side world. Because in school, the teacher has, I don't know in Austria, but here between 21 to 30 kids in their class. So clearly they can't be very specific with each of them, which we have the privilege when we keep them home to homeschool them and to educate them and everything. So in school, for example, I take ADHD. If you ask a child that has ADHD to stay sitting for about maybe an hour or two, he's gonna be the disturbing kids because he's gonna move and he's gonna. But in our community, we're not putting our kids into situation where they don't feel comfortable, because we are able to manage everything. Like, for example, some days my son wakes up and he's already overwhelmed, like sensorial kind of thing. We're not gonna go to the park with the friends, as we already know that he's alone having difficulties. So it's not mandatory that he goes. Sometimes, yes, for example, we're not removing him from the society. He has dance classes and stuff like that. If it's in the schedule, he's going, even though he's a bit overwhelmed and he learns new stuff. But it's not like that every single morning. Because when we were bringing him to school, every morning he didn't want to go, and every night when we pick him up, he was melting, as it was so difficult during the day to have all the stimulus and everything. So we have the privilege when we keep them to make sure, and we have us at home and two different. He likes to be alone a bit and to play, for example, with his Lego and build some stuff, and he can spend 2 hours doing that. Laetitia is much more, she loves things going fast, she loves to see people, she loves to move, she loves dancing, she loves sports, so they're both different. So they're learning together to welcome the differences between them, doing how do you say this, compromise. Okay, so I don't feel like playing with you right now because I feel like being alone, but give me half an hour and then I'm gonna come and join you. Okay, perfect. Yes, but I want to play with you right now. I know, but so they're learning also boundaries, they're learning limits, so there's many things. So it's much more easier. And when I say easier, I wouldn't say it's easy having your kids at home all the time and taking care of all that, but you have more of a flexibility to make sure that they are seen in everything they are. So I think that's why it doesn't stand out in those type of communities, because sometimes we do activities and, for example, they did last week something on space science, and Joshua was so much into his thing, he doesn't want to stop. And finally, they didn't force him to transfer to another activity because he was really enjoying what he was doing, and he was learning plenty of things, and he was searching about Saturn and some stuff. So like it's more flexible.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that helps not to stand out. And for my part, I think that it helps to build a great confidence in yourself when you don't feel like you're always the strange one.
And at the same time, I observe that our unschooled kids do stick out when they are among schooled kids, right? Do you see that as well?
Yes, sometimes it depends on which aspect, but yes, sometimes they know, from my impression, kids that are homeschooled know less the rules younger. I mean, like the rules, like for example, wait in a row, or wait before talking. It's some stuff that we do in small amount of time. For example, like in a big group, they all talk together, and then they learn by themselves how to let you speak, then I speak, then you speak, and you see leadership emerge very soon. But at the contrary, they're talking to everyone, adult or kid. I see much more of their passion, because what I'm saying often is kindergarten to secondary 5, they're asking you to do whatever they think you should do, like in school. And maybe at the end of the secondary, depending on the country you're in, you have to choose between human or science, and then you start having a small path you choose. But the choice really starts here, starting in Cégep and then university. So, for example, my daughter is 18 years old, and she last year she had to reflect on what she wanted to study after secondary. So for years and years and years, we're asking you to do the cursus we think is the good one, and then we're opening wide doors saying now you can do whatever you want, choose from all of this. And youth are like, okay, well, I don't know. I haven't experimented. I haven't seen. I haven't talked to people doing that. I haven't tried. So sometimes they choose something without really knowing, because it seems to make sense, and then later on they're questioning their choice, or they're like, I'm having a lot of my clients in their 30s, 40s that are, yeah, I followed the path. For example, my parents are a lawyer. I did the same thing because I felt it was the good thing and I liked it. But is it really a passion? What were you passionate about when you were a kid? Oh, drawing. But drawing doesn't make money. Oh, no. I know people like earning a living like by drawing, but sometimes you're kind of stuck in a path that's drawn, and then you start questioning what you really love, starting adulthood. I find that the homeschool, unschooled kids, those that are maybe going in more flexible type of schools also, are exploring more. And for some people, everything's done in the head. But for many, many others, it's done by trying some stuff. So I feel that we're offering something that is much more applied directly to the type of person, to the type of passion. For example, my daughter loves dancing and that stuff. She spends half of her day dancing, and she did ballet classes and stuff, and she loves it. And now she wants to try gymnastic. Okay, perfect. Joshua, on the other end, loves video game, and like every parent, I'm like, yeah, but don't want him to spend all his time on a screen and whatever. But he started loving Minecraft, so we choose a online class for homeschooling kids. So once a week he plays on Minecraft for 2 hours, and he has time in the week where he plays again because he loves it. But Minecraft is coding, writing, creativity. So we can use stuff they really love to achieve our plan of him writing, him doing something else, him. So it's extraordinary to follow them into their passion. Leticia wanted to dance until 2 or 3 weeks ago. She was like, I love dancing, but could I do gymnastic? I've been a gymnast for years. Lorelai, my older one, has been a gymnast, so now she's drawn into this. I'm like, sure. And Joshua's like, can we do swimming classes again? Sure. Like, whatever you want to try. And so they learn much more to experiment, I think.
The computer gaming part is so interesting because this was one of my biggest challenge in my parenthood, in my motherhood, to overcome the actually to overcome my trigger. It was only my trigger, really. And now I can see that this is just a subject like any other subject. And I can see now my son is 13 and he has played a lot with videos, and I can see what he has learned by that, and also what confidence it has given him that he was allowed at some point. It was a struggle beforehand, and that we tried all kinds of regulations and nothing worked. Everything sabotaged our relationship, every kind of regulation. But then I came to this point where I trusted him in that. I trusted him and just allowed him. And every time I felt like I'm not sure if he really still is aware of how he feels right now. Maybe he, this is, the fear of the parents, that he gets lost or they get lost in the computer game, and it's too long and it's too much screen and all this stuff.
And what if it becomes addictive, and what,
But the addiction thing, of course, the games are programmed very psychologists program those games, and they know how to make it addictive. But I think the main issue that make computer game addictive is the restriction part of it from our parents. This fight of not being allowed, and it's not good, but it feels so good. I'm so drawn into that. My passion is there, but no one seems to see the good of it. This is the conflict, I think. This is the main conflict, I think, that creates the issue with no, I lost the word. With
the addiction.
The addiction, thank you. So when I got into, okay, I'm trusting him, and every time I have the feeling he gets lost, he really looks pale, or it's like too many hours for in my opinion, I went, said to him, and spoke about it. I asked him, how do you feel? Because I feel you're not feeling well, but I'm not sure if this is true. That's why I want to ask you. And I really asked him with this, I want to know what's going on right now, because there is something going on with me observing you, but now I want to see if this is true, what's going on with me observing you. And I had the most interesting observation. Sometimes he did say, yeah, Mom, thanks, I really need to go pee, and I'm thirsty and I'm hungry, and I can't leave right now, or I forgot about it. Thanks for reminding me. But honestly, this was what happened, but not that much. Sometimes he said, "No, Mom, I'm having the time of my life. It's so great. I'm having," and he told me all about it, what was going on in the game right now.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes he said, "Yeah, actually, you know what? I'm actually even bored, but I don't want to stop right now." And this was for me, I had to learn that this is legitimate as well. I mean, how many times do we something where we know we are not fully in it, we know we are like compensating something, but still decide not going out of it? And I think this is very legitimate to allow a kid to experience exactly that, especially once they are aware of what they are doing, you know?
Yeah, it's very empowering too. I think that they can fix their own boundaries clearly with
Exactly.
talking to them. And I had the same um, aha moment when we talked together, and I'm like, because he's only 8, but so often I'm like, oh, that's too much. Or so sometimes we say things like, okay, there need to be a part where you go outside, where you do something else, where you choose to, because if we want to take it like that, Lego could be the same thing. It's only because it's not a screen, but he's spending sometimes 6 hours building Mario Legos, and then so
Or
I
reading.
yeah.
I mean, I know kids, they sit 10 hours a day before their books. And I remember my mom in the 70s was scared about comics,
Mm-hmm.
because this was the thing back then where parents were scared of, you know?
Totally. Yeah,
It's like,
exactly. Exactly. And it's like, okay, it's okay you're passionate about something. Like for example, I'm passionate about my work and I spend many hours doing that because I really love it. Is it a problem? Probably not. Everything you do
yes,
many hours become a problem where you lose control of it. But if you really love and you feel it's cool, and you're right, sometimes you're like just bored and continuing, it's okay. They're learning, like it's a curve, and they're making their own decision. And sometimes, for example, I talked with Joshua and he's like, okay, I'm gonna go and play Minecraft. I'm like, okay, sure. And then I'm like, I just finished work. Are you free? And he's like, no, I'm playing Minecraft. Perfect. And at the beginning, he was like, at the end, when he goes to bed at night, and he was like, Mom, I haven't spent time with you. And I want to see you because I'm working and Daddy's doing most of the homeschooling part. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. We haven't spent time. But when I
mm-hmm.
was free, you were playing, and it's okay. You're allowed, but it's a choice. And I make the choice
Exactly.
sometimes to stop working for an hour and spend time with you, as you can take the time also. So he started to understand that everything's a choice. If you do spend
Mm-hmm.
time on the video game instead of spending time with the family, if you miss the family, it's your own decision that creates that. And then
Exactly.
now he's like, there were a moment where we were saying, okay, we're going to the park, and he was like, no, I'm playing, because he was so much into it. And we were like, okay, at the beginning we're like, no, you close that, you come with us. And then finally we were like, okay, you prefer staying here? Yes. And we were going with Leticia, and she was coming back and saying like, oh, it was super cool, friends were there. And he was like, yeah, I haven't seen friends. No, you choose to stay here and to play game instead of going to the park. So he's like, okay, well, can we go back? And we were like, no, time is up, friends are home and it's gonna be lunchtime. Okay, then. So now he knows
Yes,
that whatever he chose, and it's the same for us adult, whatever we
exactly.
chose is removing time from something else or somebody else. And so we have to pick.
This is so amazing, Stephanie. Thanks for this conversation, because what and at some point I started to having, you know, the vision of the path, who how could it evolve. And meanwhile I see that it is evolving like that. I mean, he's 13 now, and now he chooses so many times going out and playing some kind of sports with his friends or whoever, uh, it, instead of sitting in the, I mean, he still plays and sits on the computer, but the choice that he goes out and doing physical in the fresh air, playing stuff, sports with other kids and friends, gained more importance. But now it's really his importance, his priority, and not something he was conditioned on, which, you know, we know, all of us, I guess, that even if they're good things we are conditioned on, if they weren't conditioned by our choice, it always feels like a little bit off, right? It always feels like we have to do, although that's my experience anyway. And I can see it when a lot of, I guess that a lot of, especially boys, once they are like in this age where parents don't have any chance anymore to interfere how they, you know, do their day, and maybe with the age of 15, 16, 17, 18, I don't know, they weren't allowed to play computer as much as they want, I'm pretty sure that they will have this time when they do it. And once it's like with 19 or with 16 or 17 or whenever, when I think then it's even more a danger in that it gets addictive. And my son, I'm sure with 18, he will play computer games, but it's, I mean, this is kid stuff for him then, you know? This is something you do if you want to, but these priorities I can see are totally shifted back then. This is a game and not an adult's thing anymore.
Completely.
And sure,
I think I read a book that was very interesting a couple of years ago, when it was, in short, saying treat kids like you treat adults. Like, for example, would you say to your husband or your wife, eat your lunch, finish your plate? Never in a lifetime. Why? Because he knows or she knows best if she's still hungry. She knows if she loves it or not. Or so I'm much more drawn into bringing good habits. For example, try the stuff you have in your plate if you don't know what it is, and decide if you like it or not, and try it next time if you didn't like it. And like, but instead of just deciding for them, if we want to have kids that are able to do choices, we need to teach them to do choices. So by that is the same thing. Like, I'm not, and maybe people were like, I'm not deciding at what time they wake up and at what time they go to bed. And even though they're very small, around 8:30, 9 sometimes, we're telling them it's getting late, and they're like, okay, we're going to bed. And sometimes they're like, oh, please, 15 more minutes. And I'm like, you're sure? Because tomorrow you have to wake up because you have something. And they choose. But if they choose and they get to wake up like, oh, Mom, I'm super tired, I don't want to wake up. Remember yesterday we talked about it, and they're directly impacted by their own decision. It's true that if you go to school and you have to wake them up at 6 in the morning, you need to make sure they go to bed, because if we do that every single day, Mama, they're gonna get sick because they don't have enough sleep. It's not my case. Most of the days they can wake up at the time they want. So it's much more with their own cycle.
And the same thing. I'm coming back to the computer gaming again. The same thing I observed as well, that this really opening up the space for gaming and experimenting with gaming and doing however and how long he wants. It's not working for school kids. It's not, because they have to do homework, they have to be in school, they have to go to bed at certain time, they have to stand up at certain time. So there isn't even this time frame of really experiencing, you know, what does it if I'm like really falling into this thing now? How do I feel? And how, you know, what are the consequences out of it? It's not possible,
and that's
because the day is already
why,
so structured.
Sure, and that's probably why at 15, 16, 17, when they start normally, not to go to bed early and stuff, that they spend many time and many hours playing, because now they're a bit freer and they're not like parents are not telling them to go to bed and that stuff. And during the day they're constrained, and that's what you should do. And sometimes they have plenty of activities. I have friends that have kids that are super happy and everything. They go to school, they do ski, or they do whatever sport and competition. But that's the part that where they can put their brain on hold, or when they have fun, like for example us scrolling on social media for some stuff, or talking with friends, or having a lunch. So that time is a great time. And the problem is with the brain, it brings the hormone of the happiness. So the more they get that, the more they want to play. The more they want to play, the less they have time for other stuff, because their schedule are already very booked. So, and I had to learn to get interested in those things, because honestly, video games for me, but he loves it so much. I'm like, okay, try to explain. And now he laughs about me. He's like, Mom, I did explain that to you last week. And I'm like, sorry, I forgot who the creepers are. I have so I had to get interested, and it's the same thing for all three of them. And even with my husband, even with new friends, you get to be interested in what they're sharing. For him, it was video game, books about, and like
I have to admit, I didn't manage it. I tried really hard to get interested in that, and I was so thankful that his father is interested. So
that's perfect.
And then I was like, okay, I mean, there is he has his partner in crime, one from us parents in there. I don't have to do it. But yeah, I really tried hard and I couldn't do it.
But often I tell him, I'm like, Joshua, I love you, but clearly we're not passionate about the same thing. It's okay. Do you want Mom to talk to you about entrepreneurship? He's like, no. I'm like, perfect. So sometimes we have those discussions. Sometimes he showed me some stuff, and sometimes he's like, but he's very passionate. Like he reads book. He wants to know the new tricks, and he exchange. And so that's very cool to see that bloom.
Yes.
And about Lego, about all of those, it's perfect. And I'm like, oh, very cool. That's the interesting part. And I mean, I think Lorelai is gonna turn 18, so she's much freer than the other two for many reasons. She now has her license and everything, and it has been for me a learning to let her go a bit, like make your own choice, believe and trust in the fact that we gave the great basis where she's gonna choose for herself, and she always chosen great friends. But that helps me a lot with Joshua and Leticia, knowing that whatever we do right now, we're gonna, in 10 years and maybe in 5, we're gonna be in that spot where they're totally free of doing almost everything they want. And I had the impression for myself, I've been very much controlled by school, by parents, by I was a gymnast, by competition, by everything for a couple of years. When I hit 18, I was like, what? I'm going to Cégep. I'm not, they're not taking the presents. So, okay, I can skip one class. I've never done that in my entire life. I'm like, okay, I can. So I skipped some. So I was like, testing. I was like, oh, geez, very cool. Then I didn't have an hour to come back. So many times I forgot to come back home because I was like, woohoo, with my kids, I tried to be as open as possible with boundaries that are clear. Like, for example, Lorelai, if you're not there for lunch, I want to know. And in contrary, if you're there, don't tell me 5 minutes prior, because maybe you're not planning the lunch. You're always allowed to come and eat at your own house, clearly. But if we did the meal and you told us you weren't there, or you didn't give me any news, well, maybe you'll have to cook for yourself. And she did. She does. And you have to tell me if you're coming back to sleep or not, because I don't want to be stressed all night knowing if you're okay or not. So we put boundaries according to their age, but they're starting on their own to make choices. She was the one who decided when we homeschooled the other two. She was in, in Quebec, it's secondary 4. So it's those 2 very important years before leaving for cégep and university. There's a lot of exam, there's a lot of many things. And with the pandemic, the school she was going to had closed the science classes, because there were not enough people in that class. So she was being stuck on not doing the classes she wanted and being away from school because of the pandemic. So she decided on her own. She told me, she was like, oh, I'm very sad about the science thing. I would have loved to do it. And I told her, like, the other 2 are not going to school. If you want to go that path, we're gonna make sure you're okay. And for her, we did classes away, because I'm not a chemical experience teacher. I hate it. I never done that. That was impossible. But we found the resources she needed at that time to achieve whatever she wants. So at 15, she decided to let go of her friend to make sure that the classes she had are those she wanted for her future. Imagine how mature is that. I was like very impressed, but it's also because she had the space to back on those things without being said, no, school is the most important. You cannot go anywhere else. And she managed herself by her own. Like all year, she was showing me some stuff, just being proud of it. But I wasn't the one taking care of, are you doing your classes? Are you doing your stuff? Are you doing this? Are you subscribed to the exam? Because she needed the exam for the credit to go to university and everything. And she did that on her own. So I see that when you give space and making choices at the level they're at for their age, they're gaining confidence, and they're also gaining responsibility. Sometimes she made the wrong, I put it in quotes, but the wrong choices. And she lives with the responsibility and with the impact. And she's like, and sometimes, like every teen, she's like, yeah, you should have told me. I'm like, when I tell you some stuff, because I give her my idea about stuff. Sometimes you take it and sometimes you choose on your own. This time you choose on your own. You don't want me to interfere in other stuff. You don't want me to interfere just when it's good for you, when you think it. So take responsibility. And she's like, yeah, you're right. Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, I'm gonna change my mind or change that.
And sometimes we have to be honest. We don't, as an adult, we don't know either. Sometimes we take wrong choices ourselves, right? I mean,
totally.
We don't know always the right thing as well.
No, so. And it's a good thing to, like, often I tell Lorelai, follow your heart, he knows. And she's like, yes, but it's a bit mixed up. It's normal. It's normal. There's fear, there's new, there's a lot of things. But listen to your small voice inside of you. I'm sure it knows. And probably if I tell you what I do, it's not the good thing for you. So choose. And then if you want, we're going to go and look together at how it's going to be possible, what we need to do to make it happen and everything. And I switched when she was 14 she wanted to change school at that time, and she used to go to private school. She was doing sports and studies and gymnastic training 20 hours a week, and she was like, I'm tired of it. It's too much. Can I change? And she had been at the same school since kindergarten, and at that time I got scared. I was like, okay, I know that it works well. She's 14, and finally that's the path we choose to go together. I was like, okay, perfect. I have only one condition. You can change school if you want. The only thing is you need to go in the sports stuff, because I didn't want her at 14 to pass from 20-25 hours of training to nothing at that age and everything. I was like, okay. So finally she switched for a school where she did cheerleading for a couple of years, and she was happy. It was only 6 hours a week, but she was still being part of a group. She was still doing sports. She was taking care of herself. But it was the first big decision I let her do, and it empowered her so much. She was like, thanks for letting me do that choice.
Awesome. And you know what, Stephanie, what came to my mind when we were talking about, you know, how controlled the day-to-day life of children is, and it's not their own choice. So, you know, schools children, they have this controlled thing from morning to morning, actually, you know, even during the nighttime they have to sleep. If we see it from this angle, that we as human beings only control our outer environment because we are traumatized, right?
Yeah.
When we look from this angle, we see actually that we are a really, really traumatized adult society who tries to control their kids.
Yeah, I think it's also like traumatized, yes, but sometimes most of us are not aware of it. Like, we've been raised in that type of functioning. A couple of years ago, when Lorelai was when she was 8, she asked me to homeschool her, and I was like, no, that's impossible. It doesn't work. I don't have time. I'm not able to do that. And I wasn't ready. I was much younger. I wasn't ready. I was a bit scared to mess it up. Many reasons. So sometimes it's not only being traumatized, but being so used to our functioning. Because most of us, when we're employees, we have schedule, we have obligation, and it's somebody else who give it to us, and it's as it was with parent, as it was with school, as it was with bus. So now you're like thinking of unschooling them and taking that out, and so it's well, it's a big decision, and it has to think about a bit before doing that. So yes, but it's the way it works. It's a bit aside of the normal working cycle, and when you go out of what you always knew, it's brand new. Like, it's like, okay, so what do we do when I don't, like, I see this with entrepreneurs every day. They skip from, or they change to employees to entrepreneur, and they're like, what I do with my schedule, they've been used to have someone else, school parents or whatever, telling them you start at 9 and you finish at 4, and you're allowed to have 1 hour lunch, and now you're totally free with your schedule. Oh, well, okay. So you have to take responsibility to put your own boundaries. Some people need the schedule, and they would do it themselves, and some people like it when it's very free. So it depends on many things. The first thing I'd say is be aware of who you are, and then change your thing accordingly of what feels good for you.
Awesome. Stephanie, it was again such a pleasure talking to you. This hour just flew by. Is there anything
thank you.
You're so welcome. Is there anything you still want to, you know, finish this talk off? Is there anything left you want to talk about?
No, I'd say a bit as I was just saying, make sure to choose for yourself and
Mm,
your family. So often people are something to say about it, or they're sharing their stuff, and you're like, oh yes, and you do some stuff because you think it's needed, or you think it. Just follow what you think is the right thing to do for you and your family, and you'll find out very, very soon that you're much more happier than you were when you were following somebody else thought.
yeah. And adding to that, this path of taking out your children from school, or not even, sometimes not even giving them into school, I mean, this is not something that can't be changed. Everything on that path can be changed at any
Totally,
time, right?
totally,
even
totally.
even going back to school, or changing how you deal with it at home. And actually, in my experience, it it naturally changes
Yeah, yeah,
permanently.
clearly, totally.
So this fear sometimes from people that, oh, but you know, then I have done something wrong. Once I've done a wrong decision, then the entire path is wrong. It's not true. You can
Yeah,
change anything at any time.
yeah. Thanks for adding that. It's so important. And thanks for
Yeah.
the conversation. It was lovely. I love talking with you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for being part of it.
Take
All the
care.
best wishes to Canada. Bye.
Bye.